Highmax Simulator has been a widely requested game on my channel, starting with my Gungriffon retrospective some time ago. Actually, to be exact, it's about 8 months before this video is being posted, so around 10 billion years ago in internet time. Now, being a fan game, it isn't exactly part of the series, but it is probably the closest thing we will ever get to an actual Gungriffon 3. There is Blaze and Allied Strike, but they're more like evolutions or reimaginings rather than true sequels to the Saturn games. Unfortunately, much like Gungriffon 2, it was developed by a Japanese developer and is therefore in Japanese. Gungriffon 2 did eventually get an English patch earlier this year thanks to fans of the series, but Highmax Simulator exists outside of the emulator scene, and partially due to sitting cold for nearly 6 years, mostly goes unnoticed by those who didn't come across it through word of mouth or forums. I've played every single Gungriffon game and I still hadn't heard of it until viewers started telling me it existed. It is a shame really, because as I said, Highmax Simulator is the closest thing to a third game in the series and keeps absolutely true to the original, with the benefit of a very fast and fluid control style, mostly due to the game being played with a keyboard and mouse rather than the more cumbersome Sega controller. That isn't to say I don't enjoy the original controls. It certainly felt as if you were controlling a massive war machine, but with Highmax Simulator, everything feels far more fluid and reactive. Now, I did say that I wasn't going to be covering many modern games for the time being, but I really don't know if I consider Highmax Simulator modern. The game was originally released in 2014 after beginning development in 2010. Its last update was released in 2017, a massive time frame for a passion project like this. If I were going by release date alone, 9 years isn't exactly new by any means. Still, it's a strange thing to cover as it's technically a more modern fan game of a classic game that is now not technically modern at all. Thanks to the power of the internet, I'm now able to translate the game's description so that we might know what the Highmax Simulator was intended to be. Highmax Simulator is a 3D shooting game set in a near-future battlefield. The player belongs to the Japan Foreign Legion and trains various combat situations on the simulator, with the aim of becoming a pilot driving the armored walking combat vehicle Highmax. Okay, by this description, it's easy to see that it isn't wholly concerned with its story. This is fine, the original games weren't either. I was perfectly happy with the fact that I could pilot the titular Highmax 2nd generation AWGS unit once again. Many mech games are just fine with establishing world states and the conflicts that arise from them rather than deep engaging stories, so I consider this sort of thing rather standard. This lack of story also has the added benefit of allowing Highmax Simulator to exist within the Gungriffon universe without modifying it in a way that makes it feel like fanfiction. Not that there's anything wrong with fanfiction, but oftentimes stories like that tend to be what people want from a franchise rather than what it actually is. Though I'm aware that there are some extremely good fan stories out there that are absolutely faithful to the source material, they just often find themselves buried by all the other stuff out there. Highmax Simulator features far more content than it rightfully should. Being a free fan game, it's baffling to think how much work must have went into this. Compared to the original, it's somewhat longer, even including a few things from the sequel, along with new features. You aren't going to get the ability to pilot other unit types from the get-go, or customize loadouts as you could with Gungriffon 2, but that sort of thing isn't necessary anyhow. The former is unlocked after the final mission, however. There are some survival scenarios included as well, so that players might focus strictly on combat if they so choose. I really don't know why they would, since the whole game is centered around combat anyhow, but it's nice to have these extras here. You can also unlock concept art and a few other bonuses by going after better rankings and medals as you play, adding quite a bit of replay value. Though if you enjoy the original Gungriffon games, you'll likely be happy just replaying it for the sake of nostalgia alone. And if that is the case, prepare to be enamored by the game's many callbacks. Almost every mission in Highmax Simulator acts as a variation of missions featured in the original 2 games. For those who are familiar with something like Sonic Mania, this is basically the same idea, it just didn't get the backing of Game Arts. Though after its founder sadly passed away in 2011, the studio had simply ceased anyways. Though it is completely possible that there was some other reason behind Game Arts' silence throughout the years. Now, knowing that a lot of the source code and assets for Saturn games have been lost over the years, my only assumption is that the developer or developers of this game must have done it themselves. If this is the case, these people deserve a medal for what they've done here. The Gungriffon series has a very unique look and feel, and they've expertly captured it here, to a degree that seems almost impossible. It genuinely feels like I'm playing the Saturn originals just with better controls. And while there are a lot of retro callbacks out there and great game remakes, I don't think I've seen anything with such an obsessive amount of detail applied. Of course, there are a few new things here, not enough to really change anything, but they are sure to be a great addition for those looking for a more immersive experience. Primarily, there is a new data link feature that allows players to zoom in on an ally, see things from their viewpoint, and perform certain actions. Sometimes you can set points for them to patrol, adding a slight strategic edge to gameplay, or request supporting fire. Neither of these things are functional at a level that would add an edge to the gameplay, but they are nice to have around. There are also little things such as clearly marked and numbered mission points on the radar. For the most part, these really help bypass the language barrier, as getting around is a lot easier when you have to follow numbered positions rather than rely on the game's Japanese voices. Oh, and before I forget, this game does feature full voice acting, which was a complete surprise to me, and a very nice addition to something you can just download in a single click. I don't have a clue what's being said, but it's nice that this amount of effort has been made.
をめぐる APC と PEU の戦いはユーラシア大陸全土へと広がった。食糧危機解決のためロシアが穀倉地帯のウクライナ太平洋に踏み切ったのだった。
There are a few caveats, such as the game's menu controls being a little fickle, or the escape button exiting the game if it's pushed twice, which leads to a whole lot of closeouts that you don't want to happen. I had an issue with recording the game as well, whereas the actual footage was far smaller than what you're seeing on screen. This was likely because of the game trying to keep an aspect ratio that allowed for its pixelated Saturn style. And no, for those wondering, you can't actually adjust the game's resolution either. When it came to the gameplay, my only complaint was the night vision, which didn't really feel close to the original game. I found that it made things wildly confusing in night and snowy areas. When situations get heated, there was far too much flashing and shaking. And I'm sure this won't bother some people, but it really bothered me. And of course, being so accurate to the original, flying enemies also remain a massive burden, requiring a bit more finesse to take down than AWGS and ground units do. You know, typical Gungriffon stuff basically. If you're willing to look over the game's few flaws, which I really don't see how they'd affect things enough for a fan of the series to look away, I definitely suggest giving this one a look. I'm including a link to the game in the description below, as well as a video that will help those struggling to understand its deeper concepts. Don't worry, it's not by me, it's by someone who knows far more, so check that out. HighMacs Simulator is free, and if you're new to Gungriffon, this is a good place to start. Just don't expect its superior control scheme in older entries. However, everything else is absolutely faithful. There are passion projects out there, but they aren't always for something as off the beaten path as the Gungriffon series. HighMacs Simulator has sat dormant for some time, but it's amazingly still around for everyone to grab and play. If you've made it this far in the video, I certainly suggest doing that. I'm Kei-Nova, and if you'd be interested in me going through the Gungriffon series individually, let me know in the comments below. If you're new here, please like and subscribe to support the channel if you like what I do. If you don't, then just thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.